Let's talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I know it's complicated, emotionally charged, and feels impossible to untangle.
But this isn't just history. It's a conflict affecting millions right now. Two peoples, both with deep ties to the same land, locked in a dispute that's lasted over a century.
Ignoring it doesn't help. Understanding is the first step. We're not here to solve it, but to give you a basic framework. A beginner's guide to not sounding like a complete idiot. We'll walk through the history, key events, and both perspectives, because even a little understanding matters, so buckle up, let's dive in. To truly understand the complexities of the present day, the intricate tapestry of events that have shaped the region, we need to rewind the clock, journey back in time to the late 1800s. We must delve into the historical context, examining the roots of the ongoing conflict. Back then, this land, now so fiercely contested, was an integral part of the vast and sprawling Ottoman Empire. It was a province, a territory under Ottoman control. This land was home to a diverse population comprised mostly of Arab Muslims and Christians who had lived there for centuries, their lives intertwined with the land. Alongside them existed a smaller yet significant Jewish community with its own deep historical ties to the region. In this complex environment, two powerful and transformative ideas began to emerge, ideas that would forever alter the course of history. The first was Zionism, a burgeoning political movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the region, a safe haven for Jews from around the world. The second was Palestinian Arab nationalism, a growing sense of national identity and a desire for self-determination, with both movements laying claim to the very same land, creating a collision course. The cataclysmic events of World War I brought about the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, redrawing the map of the Middle East and ushering in a new era. In the aftermath, Britain assumed control, establishing the British Mandate for Palestine, and in doing so, made a series of conflicting promises to both the Jewish and Arab populations, sowing the seeds of future discord. The Balfour Declaration of 1917, a pivotal moment, expressed British support for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. However, this declaration also included assurances to protect the rights and interests of the existing non-Jewish communities, a delicate balancing act that proved to be a recipe for future disaster and escalating tensions. As the situation in Europe deteriorated, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased significantly, particularly as Jews sought refuge from persecution and rising anti-Semitism. This influx of immigrants led to significant demographic changes within Palestine, further fueling existing tensions and exacerbating the already strained relations between the communities. The Arab population grew increasingly concerned, fearing displacement and the loss of their land and way of life. Meanwhile, Jewish immigrants viewed their arrival as a return to their ancestral homeland, a fulfillment of historical and religious aspirations. As a result, violence between the two communities escalated, and the British authorities found it increasingly difficult to maintain order and control. By the end of the devastating Second World War, a weary Britain, unable to resolve the escalating conflict, ultimately handed the complex and intractable problem over to the newly formed United Nations. The situation was now a powder keg, two peoples, each with their own distinct history and aspirations, vying for control of one land. All of this unfolded against a backdrop of broken agreements, failed diplomatic efforts, and a long history of unfulfilled promises, creating a climate of deep mistrust and resentment. The stage was now irrevocably set for a major conflict, a clash of national aspirations and competing claims, and the entire world, acutely aware of the potential consequences, was watching with growing concern and apprehension. In the aftermath of World War II, with the horrors of the Holocaust still fresh in the global consciousness, the question of Palestine became increasingly urgent. The United Nations, seeking a solution to the growing tensions between Jewish and Arab populations in the region, proposed a partition plan in 1947. The core of the UN plan was the creation of two independent states, one for Jews and one for Arabs, each with defined territories. This division aimed to provide self-determination for both peoples, acknowledging their distinct national aspirations and historical ties to the land. Recognizing its unique religious and historical significance to all three Abrahamic faiths, Jerusalem was designated as an international zone to be administered under a special international regime. This was intended to ensure free access and protection of holy sites for everyone. After much deliberation, Jewish leaders, understanding the opportunity to establish a sovereign homeland, ultimately accepted the partition plan, albeit with reservations about the proposed borders. However, Arab leaders vehemently rejected the UN proposal, viewing it as unfair, unjust, and a continuation of colonial interference in the region. They argued that it disregarded the rights of the Arab majority and allocated a disproportionate amount of land to the Jewish minority. Despite the Arab rejection, on May 14, 1948, as the British Mandate over Palestine came to an end, Israel declared its independence, fulfilling a long-held Zionist dream. For Jewish people around the world, especially those who had survived the horrors of the Holocaust, the creation of Israel represented a beacon of hope and a safe haven from persecution. But for Palestinians, the same event marked the Nakba, the catastrophe, a period of immense loss, displacement, and dispossession. In the wake of Israel's declaration, neighboring Arab states, vowing to prevent the establishment of a Jewish state and support the Palestinian cause, invaded the newly declared nation. Against all odds, Israel not only survived the war, but also expanded its territory beyond the boundaries outlined in the original UN partition plan. As a direct consequence of the war, the envisioned Arab state, as proposed by the United Nations, never materialized, leaving the Palestinians without a sovereign nation. The conflict resulted in the displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians, who were forced to flee their homes and become refugees in neighboring countries and territories. These refugees were largely unable to return to their homes, becoming stateless and dependent on international aid. Many of their villages were systematically destroyed, and their lands were confiscated, further cementing their displacement and sense of loss. This initial displacement created a refugee crisis that has tragically persisted for generations, with many Palestinians still living in refugee camps today. For Israelis, the year 1948 marks the triumphant birth of their nation, a symbol of resilience and self-determination. But for Palestinians, it remains a painful reminder of the loss of their homeland and the beginning of a protracted struggle for recognition and statehood. It's crucial to acknowledge that both narratives are deeply rooted in historical experiences and collective memories. These divergent perspectives have profoundly shaped the trajectory of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and continue to influence the region's political landscape. The territorial map of the region underwent significant changes in 1948, but the underlying conflict only intensified, setting the stage for decades of further strife. The initial refugee crisis evolved into a seemingly permanent situation, with generations of Palestinians growing up in refugee camps yearning for a resolution. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has remained a constant focus of international attention, with the United Nations and other global actors continuously seeking a path towards a just and lasting peace. After 1948, the region, still reeling from the aftermath of war, entered a period defined by cycles of conflict and fragile, uneasy peace. The initial Arab-Israeli war had redrawn the map and displaced hundreds of thousands, leaving deep-seated grievances on all sides. The dream of peaceful coexistence seemed a distant hope as regional tensions simmered just below the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. The Six-Day War in 1967 changed everything. It was a watershed moment that dramatically reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. In a swift and decisive campaign, Israel gained control of vast territories, altering the power dynamics and setting the stage for decades of future conflict. Israel captured Gaza, adding it to the list of territories under its control. This coastal strip, densely populated with Palestinians, became a focal point of the ongoing conflict. The West Bank, a territory of immense historical and religious significance, also fell under Israeli control, further complicating the already complex situation. East Jerusalem, with its holy sites sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and more. Its capture ignited passions and became a major obstacle in the path to peace. Israel became an occupying power, a role that would define its relationship with the Palestinian people for years to come. The occupation brought with it a new set of challenges and responsibilities, as well as increased international scrutiny, ruling over millions of Palestinians whose lives were now governed by Israeli military law. This created a complex and often fraught dynamic, marked by daily interactions and constant friction. For Israelis, this meant security, a need to protect themselves from attacks and ensure the safety of their citizens in a volatile region. For Palestinians, it meant occupation and lost freedoms, a daily reality of checkpoints, restrictions on movement, and limited opportunities. Israeli settlements began popping up in occupied territories, seen by Israelis as a way to secure their presence and by Palestinians as a violation of international law and an obstacle to peace, fueling more resentment and anger among Palestinians who viewed the settlements as a land grab and a threat to their future state. There were moments of hope, fleeting glimpses of a possible future where Israelis and Palestinians could live side by side in peace. Egypt made peace with Israel in 1979, a historic breakthrough that offered a glimmer of hope for a wider regional settlement. And the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, a series of agreements that aimed to establish a framework for a two-state solution, created the Palestinian Authority, granting limited self-governance to Palestinians in parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. But peace didn't last. The optimism of the Oslo years gradually faded as deep divisions and unresolved issues continued to plague the peace process. Extremists on both sides derailed talks, resorting to violence and undermining the fragile progress that had been made. Rabin was assassinated, a devastating blow to the peace process, removing a key advocate for reconciliation. Suicide bombings, acts of terror that sowed fear and distrust, further poisoning the atmosphere, and military crackdowns followed, a cycle of violence that seemed impossible to break. Final status issues, the core issues that lay at the heart of the conflict. Jerusalem, with its competing claims and deep religious significance, borders, the lines that would define the future states of Israel and Palestine, refugees, the millions of Palestinians displaced by past conflicts, proved too tough to solve, each issue a complex web of competing narratives and seemingly irreconcilable demands. The Second Intifada erupted, bringing more violence and mistrust, shattering any remaining hopes for a quick resolution. The cycle of hope and heartbreak continued, a seemingly endless loop of negotiations, violence, and dashed expectations. Each failed peace effort left deeper scars, both physical and emotional, on both societies. The occupation and settlements became entrenched, solidifying the status quo and making a two-state solution increasingly difficult to achieve. And the dream of peace grew more distant, overshadowed by the realities of occupation, violence, and mistrust. To understand, you have to see both sides. For Israelis, it's about survival, a safe haven after centuries of persecution, surrounded by hostile neighbors. Security is everything, every concession feels risky. For Palestinians, it's about loss and occupation, displacement, refugee camps, and daily restrictions. The conflict is a fight for freedom and justice. Each side sees itself as the victim, the other as the aggressor. Both narratives are rooted in real history and pain. Empathy doesn't mean agreement, it means recognizing both stories. And that's the only way forward. Why is peace so hard? Because the core issues are existential. Jerusalem, both sides claim it as their capital, both see it as sacred. Borders and settlements, where to draw the line and what to do with hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Refugees, millions of Palestinians demand the right to return. Israelis fear this would end their state. Security, Israel wants guarantees. Palestinians want real sovereignty. Each side's demand is the other's nightmare. The two-state solution sounds simple, but the details are a minefield. Every negotiation runs into the same walls. Justice and survival are both at stake. That's why the conflict endures, and why solutions remain elusive. So why does this matter to you? This conflict shapes global politics, fuels extremism, and impacts millions. It's not just a distant headline, it's a human tragedy with worldwide consequences. Understanding isn't about picking sides, it's about empathy and responsibility. Both Israelis and Palestinians have real fears and hopes. Lasting peace requires seeing both truths. Ignoring it helps no one. Paying attention is the first step. You're now better equipped to understand the headlines and the people behind them. That's a start.